morning, everyone. So today we're here in the car. The car's been making a bit of a funny noise in we believe the right front wheel. It only does it once in a while, only does it for a short period of time, so we haven't been able to catch it when it's doing it and get it on the lift. But we did look it over a little bit. So we're going to put it in right now. We're going to get it up on the lift and we're going to see if we can figure out what this noise is. So hold on while we get your set up and we'll get this thing up on the lift. Alright, so we got the car in here on the lift. We're going to check out the noise in the front end. First we're going to fix this parking light. So last winter we had a snowstorm. Well, this winter you saw us plow some of the road and cut a tree out of the road. There's a lot of frozen hard snow on the road. It was deeper than the front of the car. Some of the vibration broke some plastic, there's some broke parts on the nose, and this broken parking light. We're not going to bother to buy a new parking light. We're just going to kind of makeshift repair this. Perfect. Like I said, there's a few broken pieces on the front as well, where the ice was hitting on here and broke the plastic. Again, we're not going to worry about that because this is just our winter car and it's cosmetic. It did not get into the radiator or anything like that. So the first thing I want to do, and I don't know if I described this noise well enough, but it's done it twice, about 3 or 4 weeks apart. And when it does it for about probably 8 to 10 miles, then it seems to go away. And it's like a loud squeal, grind type noise, not real loud. And it does seem to have some effect on which way you turn the car, but not so much if you step on the brakes. So we're going to check the wheel bearing. We're going to turn it, and there's no noise there at all. And you can't feel it, but it's nice and smooth. We're going to try like this, like we're going to push and pull at the same time and see if we can make it rock. And there's no give at all in that. We can check the tire out in while we're right here, side to side. That feels good. So we're going to go ahead and take the tire off, see if there's something going on with the brakes. See if I can find a light. So right away I see a couple things. This backing plate right here, you notice it's actually just about touching, right? I mean, not quite, but you can see if you look down in there, if I can pull it away, you can see where it has touched once or twice. So we're going to go ahead and shove that back out of the way like that. Going to make sure it's not touching anywhere else. And you gotta love the road salt in Maine. Rots everything out. We're gonna look at our brake pads. This one here looks like brand new, which so let me get in there. Hold on a minute. Let me get the glove off. So there's a piece of 1/4 inch steel right here to start with, and then the brake pad here, which is probably almost a 1/2 inch thick, which is a little concerning, just because these brakes haven't been changed in a long time. I'm going to come around here and have you look right in here. This right here, where my fingernail is the edge of the rotor. This is that piece of 1/4 inch steel. You'll notice there's almost no pad on it inside. And if I feel down in here, and I'll show you when we get this apart, because we're going to put brakes on this thing for sure now that I see this. There's about a 1/4 inch lip on the back of that rotor. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this caliper off, take this rotor off, and just see what we need for parts, so we can go ahead and go to the auto parts store and get what we need. So there's plugs here, and under these plugs are screws that hold the caliper onto the caliper bracket. So we're going to take those out first. There'll be another one right there. And something worth pointing out on the Volkswagen itself, we're going to need an extension to get past that brake line, but something worth pointing out is Volkswagen has a fastener called triple square, and it looks a little bit like a star bit, but it's not. And if you're working on a lot of Volkswagens, you're going to need a set of triple square bits. Not sure why Volkswagen did that, but anyways, we're going to go get an extension and get this part. We're going to take our slide screws right out because we're going to go ahead and clean them up before we put it back together. And then we're going to see if we can get our caliper out. Actually, I think what we may do is take the bolts out of the caliper bracket at the same time and get that out of here as one assembly and then take it apart. So we're going to go get some big tools. Those are a lot bigger bolts right up in here. There we go, 21 millimeter. Alright, there's our caliper bolt bracket. Caliper bracket bolt. There, say that fast. Big pry bar. We'll see what we can get apart. There we go. So now going to do is get the caliper out of there, and it has this spring-loaded clip thingamabob here. We'll see if we can do something to disassemble that. So caliper bracket, we'll clean that all up. This is where, right in here, where things slide. So the caliper moves. These bolts hold the caliper on are inside this channel, and they're greased up, and the caliper moves. The theory is what's supposed to happen is when you apply the brakes, the piston comes against the pad on the back side, pushes it against the rotor, which then pulls this part of the caliper back this way to squeeze on this side as well. As you can see here, this one is not sliding. So we're going to do a lot of cleaning on this to make it slide. So what I mean by that, take this pad out of here and I will show you. Maybe. I guess we'll take this one out first. Okay, see that pad there? You see that's all pad. This is the backing plate and this is all pad. That's just like new, that pad is. And we can get this one out of here. There we go. You see how little pad is left on that one? Now it's wore real funny. So that was basically, that caliper was not actually not sliding like it's supposed to. So what we have to do now is we'll get that hung up out of the way, see if it'll stay there. You don't want to let it hang by the hose. We have to get this screw out, and then we'll get this rotor off, and we're going to compress that caliper, which doesn't look like it's going to want to stay there. I'll toss it right back there. We're going to compress that caliper to make sure it compresses okay before we go to the auto parts store in case we need a new caliper. Alright, so we have to press this piston in on the brake caliper. And there's several ways you can do that. You can use a pair of vice grips, something. It's just pushes straight in. We happen to have this kit that works for back brakes as well. Most of the modern vehicles on the back brakes, you have to actually turn the caliper at the same, the piston at the same time you push it in. So we're gonna see if we can make this work. This tool doesn't seem to be long enough to get way up in that. It's a very deep piston on this. So I think what I'm gonna do is go find me a socket that I can stick in there. There. Adapt, improvise, and overcome, right? Put that socket up in there first. So we're just using the socket as a spacer, you see, and that takes up a ton of space. Now we'll just spin this thing out until it's close. And another word of thought on this, when you do this, if you happen to see a little bit of brake fluid on the ground in the middle of the vehicle afterwards, if your master cylinder was really full, when you do this, you're going to push some fluid back into that master cylinder. So you could actually end up seeing some fluid. Now I'll see if you can watch this real close, but this is the piston, this metal piece here. This is a rubber boot. This piece right here is a rubber boot, and then this is the cylinder. So this should go back inside there if everything goes right. And you can see pretty easily, it's going right back in nice and easy. The concern with these sometimes, and more so on the older vehicles, that if there's any corrosion or anything and then you push this back in there, it binds up and it doesn't go. And then, you know, this will stick. There, that side is done. We'll see if we can get the rotor off. You don't necessarily have to put these screws back in. What this is for is just to hold it flush and tight while you put all the brakes together. So if they come out in a destroyed fashion, don't lose any sleep over it. Now, because we don't care about that rotor, we're going to get a PFH. So now I'll have Sue bring her in here, and you can see that lip I was talking about. See how much that rotor is worn down in there. It's probably 3/16 of an inch. Camera probably doesn't do it justice, but it was really worn down in there. So we're definitely going to need a new rotor. And then we'll see if you can see right there is that mark I was saying. Really hard to see. We're going to go ahead and get the other side all tore apart like this. Figure out what we need. We're going to make a quick trip to the auto parts store. So if everything goes right, we should be back like right now. I know I said we'd bring you back when we had us all ready to go back together, but this side over here, the driver's side, actually has electrical wires hooked to the brake pad. So we've got our caliper off, and we're going to take our brake pad out, and you see it's got a set of electrical wires hooked to it right there. And that's presumably to tell the computer when the pads are worn down enough to need to be changed, which is interesting because this pad is in pretty rough shape. See, it's coming off the backing right there, and real thin, and we're at a really funny angle. So anyways, we wanted to bring you back and show you that because that is different than the other side. So some vehicles obviously have that. We're going to go ahead and unplug it and continue on, and we'll be back when we're ready to go back together.
So this is the old rotor off the driver's side. You can see it also has some odd wear patterns. These are the new brake pads, so we're going to compare them to the old ones and make sure they look like they match. And one of the two new rotors, we'll compare both of them, make sure that they also look like they match what came off of the car.
So as Sue mentioned, we've been to the auto parts store and we picked up our parts. First thing we're going to do is make sure our rotors are the same. And you could take your old rotors with you. We did. We just wanted to show you the same diameter. Then what I like to do is turn it upside down, make sure they're roughly the same height. Obviously the new ones are going to be just a little taller because they don't have a 1/4 inch dish ground down into them. And then if you're really worried about it, you can tip it upside down like that, and you can leave this one right side up. And you can make sure the holes line up for the wheel studs. And you'll see down in there we have some holes for the wheel studs. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to wash this up, put it on the car. What I mean by that is these come packed with like a grease or oil on them, like a residue, so they don't rust. And we need to take a little bit of brake clean. We need to wash that off because we don't want that in the brake pads. Now when we do this, what I like to do is hose it lightly, like that, both sides. Because as you probably heard me say before, with brake clean, you get it wet, let it set for a second, and then you hose it off. So we're going to put that on there and line up our little hole for our little screw. What we have to do now is we have to clean up our caliper brackets, and we'll go ahead and put the rotor on the other side, put our caliper brackets on both sides, and we're going to wire brush these real well. What we're really looking for is you'll see how that pad set right there in that little groove, and it's got like a hump on both sides. That's just years of grime built up on there, and that's what keeps that pad from moving and makes the inside one wear so fast. So we'll clean these all up. We'll bring you back when we're ready to put brake pads in. Something I forgot to mention when we turned the camera off last time, as you're putting this back together on all your bolts, put a little never sees on there. Chances are good we'll never have to do brakes again on this car, just because it's going to rot out before it needs brakes again. But pretty cheap insurance to make parts come back apart. So we've got our old brake pad here, and we've got our new brake pads. We're going to compare the two. You'll notice this one has the wire on it. So we're going to open this package up because we're working on the driver's side at the moment. Be careful not to cut the wire off. This is the inner pad. Get some stuff out of your way here. And this is the outer pad. I'm sorry, this is the inner pad, that's the outer pad. So this needs to match this. The question is, does it? And this piece fell off this one, it was all rusted. So as you can see, it's a match. It fits right in there. So we're gonna go ahead and load up our caliper, put this back together, and yeah, get this job done. Sometimes you can put them in like this ahead of time and slide your caliper on over it, but on this particular car you can't because it has this thing that has to go into the caliper. So we're going to get our caliper down here where we can get at it, get those things inside the piston like that, and ta-da. Now this is the one that has that spring that goes down here, but it doesn't seem to go on the pad. So that one we're just going to hold. Going to get our caliper how we want it. Get our wire untangled out of everything. Just something else for an obstacle. And we're going to put this together. Now that spring, stick them out like that. I'm not sure I really know the purpose of the spring. I suspect it's to keep the caliper from rattling. So that's all in there. We have to put our bolts in, and these are the bolts I was talking about. You'll notice they're smooth, there's no head on them. So the caliper can just easily slide on those bolts. Put the bottom bolt in. Put our plugs back in, keep the dirt out, keep the slides clean. Fish our electrical wire back up here, plug everything back together. You'll hear it click. Put it back in its position right there. In our case, we had a bit of a mishap with the connector, and the piece that holds it into the thing is broken, so we're going to put a wire tie on it. That's how we like to fix things. We have to find one though. So we're just going to put a couple wire ties on it right there, tying it to the brake line. That should be just fine. And yes, I know I should torque those, but 6 Ooga-Doogas is perfect. So let's go to the other side. All right, so we've got all the brakes done. Couple things we want to point out. One is when you're using the never cease, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but don't get it on the rotors, don't get it on the pads. Keep it away from the parts that are actually going to create the friction to stop your vehicle. You don't want to make those slippery. The other one is when you compress the pistons like we did, they will go all the way in, and there's a space there so you can get the caliper on. When you get in the car and step on the brakes, it's going to go all the way to the floor because it has to push those pistons out. So before you take off with the vehicle, because it'll still scare the daylights out of you when you start backing out of the shop, pump the brakes up. Don't just put it in reverse, start backing up, because when you hit the brakes, it's going to go right to the floor. So that's the big key, pump the brakes up. But just to recap, this is what we ended up doing. We put 2 rotors and a set of pads on. In our case, the pads were $22, I think, and the rotors were another $120 something. I think this project cost us about $150 total. But you can tell we weren't going to get much more life out of that or that. And this is the best of the 2 rotors right here. And you can see how worn down in that was. We don't know if that was our noise, but it's what we're going to assume for now. And if the noise comes back, we'll bring you back and we'll dig a little deeper. So hopefully this helped you. If you decide you want to tackle this yourself, the biggest thing is, if you're under the vehicle, make sure it's on jack stands, be safe. And if you have another vehicle, you have a way to get to the auto parts store, take it apart first. Take your parts with you. What you may want to do, you may want to get online or call the auto parts store and say, hey, I'm working on a 2009 Volkswagen Jetta. I think I'm going to need rotors and pads and maybe calipers for the front of it. Find out if they're in stock, because that could change what you do. You may decide, hey, I'm not going to tear this apart today because I have to go to work tomorrow. And if you can't get parts, it's going to leave you high and dry. But as you can see, it wasn't really a complicated job. So, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. I mean, that's the big thing, is you are going to get dirty, anytime you work on these vehicles. But that particular job that cost us $150, that may have cost you an extra couple $100 at a shop. If you took this into Volkswagen, told them you wanted brakes, they would use Volkswagen parts instead of auto parts store parts. Who knows what that would have cost. Anyways, point is, part of the homesteading lifestyle is learning to do some of this stuff yourself. Running some older vehicles so that we can maintain them ourselves. Well, not so we can maintain them ourselves, so we run older vehicles. We don't have vehicle payments, we don't have huge registration bills, and we don't have huge insurance premiums because we don't have $50,000, $60,000 cars. So anyways, we hope you enjoyed. Any questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.